So in this lesson, we are going to talk about properties of logarithms. In the last lesson, we learned what a logarithm was and how to rewrite things in different ways, exponential and logarithmic form. So quickly, we're going to learn some properties today. Remember, a logarithm is an exponent. So logarithmic form and exponential form mean the same thing, they just look different. So the properties of logarithms really come from the properties of exponents, and you'll kind of see that here a little bit later. Okay, so these are the properties of logarithms that we're going to go through today. Actually, this first one you already know. This is the change of base property. You were doing that and using that on your evaluating logarithms on the last assignment. Okay, so change of base property, the one we just mentioned, you already know, but just to quickly review that, when you're using change of base, you're going to go log 8,000 divided by log 5. Remember that this number is a little higher, so that's how I remember that that goes up on top. And then this is your base, it's a little bit lower, it goes on the bottom. That's kind of how I remember it. And then you take your calculator and you just type this in. So I'm going to do that. Log 8,000 divided by log 5. So log 8,000. Don't forget to close the parenthesis here, and then divided by log of 5. Close the parenthesis, and we get 5.58. Okay, I'm going to round to 2 decimal places, so 5.58 we'll say. So then this is 5.58. So that means this right here is equal to 5.58. So that's the change of base property. It's a fairly easy one to use, but it's super important. Okay. So also, before I move on, this just really means 5 to the 5.58 power would give me 8,000. Okay. All right, so the first property that I want to look at is this product property of logarithms. And you see that right here. But this really just is generated from this property of exponents. If you remember, if you have b to the m power times b to the n power, you can add the exponents. So that's where this property really comes in, because exponents are logarithms. So that's what we have here. So when you see this down here, it says express as a single logarithm and then evaluate. So really what we want to do is I'm starting with this side really, and I want to make it look like this. Well, according to the property, as long as these two bases here are the same, you can use this property. And we notice here that these two are both 6, so we're okay. So then this means I would write log base 6, and then I would figure out what 4, according to this property, I would go 4 times 9. Okay, that would be my m and n. So I want to express as a single logarithm, making sure that it's simplified. So 4 times 9 is 36. So the first part of the problem is done. That would be this right here. Okay, so then the second part, it says to evaluate. And so you can either think of this one of two ways. You could say 6 to what power gives me 36, or you could always use change of base if you're not sure and do log of 6 over log of 36 over a log of 6. And if you did that, you would end up with 2. So the two things that you really need to write for this problem, express as a single logarithm, would be this, and then evaluate, that's this answer right here. Okay, so that's called the product property of logarithms, and you should be able to go back and forth between the two. Okay, we will mostly focus on going this way though. Okay, let's look at our second property. Second one is called the quotient property of logarithms, and it comes from this over here. When you have two things with the same base and you're dividing them, you can subtract the exponents. Well, that's where this comes in with property of logarithms. So I see a subtraction here. I notice that both of the bases are 4, so I can rewrite this as log base 4 of 3072 divided by 3. Now, that's not simplified, so I haven't quite done this yet. I've got to simplify 3,000 divided by, or 3,700, or 3,072 divided by 3. So I want to do that on my calculator first. And that's 1024. Okay, so now I got to figure out what is 4 to what power is 1024, or I can do change of base. So I'm going to do change of base just to be sure. Okay, type that into my calculator. Log 1024 divided by log of 4. Okay, we get 5. So again, that just means 4 to the 5th power gives me 1024. So this is equal to 5. So the two things that I really want to make sure that I'm writing when I do my assignment are a simplified single logarithm and then evaluating it right here. So I'm going to put some boxes around there so it's clear that that's my answer. All right, and then there's one other property called the power property of logarithms. And this really just says if you've got a power right here, an exponent, and this is kind of weird. If you have one of those, basically what it says is you can take and you can move it to the front and just make sure it's multiplication. So that's where this, you'll notice that P ended up moving in front of the rest of it. So it's kind of weird. So you might say this is kind of a weird property. It is, but it will be helpful when some of these things end up, some of these stuff in here ends up being variables instead of numbers. So what I would do is I would say, all right, I've got this 6 now is going to go from right here to in front, okay? So it's going to become this. Okay, so this actually would be my express as a single logarithm. I've just rewritten it. So now I've used this property up here. Okay, so that part is done. Now we need to evaluate. And in order to evaluate, okay, so that's my answer for this. In order to evaluate, what I want to do is I got to figure out what this is first. And then I can multiply it by 6. So I really want to just figure out what that is by doing change of base. So I'm going to say log 32 divided by log 2 first. What is that? Or 2 to what power is 32? You can do that either way, but I'm just going to do this on my calculator. Log 32 divided by log 2. Okay, that is also 5. Okay, so this is 5. So that means right over here, in place of this, I can put a 5, because log base 2 of 32 is 5. But now I've got also multiplied by 6. So I really have 6 times 5. So that means my answer then is 30. That means this right here is equal to 30. So the two things that I really want to have as my answer is this first thing that I put in a box, and then this second thing right here. So those are the two things. We just expressed it as a single logarithm, and then we evaluated. Okay? And those are the three new properties to put together with the first property, which you already know. So again, this one we already knew, and then these are the three that are new. And I would use this slide as a reference. I put some examples on the right here if you want some more examples to help you out as you're doing your assignment. But really your assignment is just working through and getting comfortable with these three properties so you can use them later. Okay? Hope it makes sense. Review it as you need to.